Outlaw Country by Ghotty. Chapter 21. I think I'll just stay here and drink. It was midnight in Wolfbrun, yet the city was still very much alive. Lights shined from most of the stores and the citizens walked the streets, and I had figured that my outfit would make me stand out, but I couldn't have been further from the truth. There seemed to be no real guidelines for fashion. Some dressed like peacocks, others just settled for full cloaks. I saw some folks with oversized swords and ineffective armor, walking around with what I assumed to be whores, until I realized they were just well armed. I don't understand these ladies' fashion sense, I remarked while riding Jeff, who was cantering down the main road. Well, don't ask me, he said, with a verbal shrug. I don't get clothing in general. I just see armor platings, but they seem to have the stomach unprotected. A bullet to the gut could kill you almost as surely as one to the head. Well, I can assure you the armor isn't designed for gunfights, said Jeff. Maybe they need extra flexibility. I grunted in acknowledgement. It wasn't my business anyway. It was just quite a culture shock to me. I kept going. I was heading away from the castle in what I assumed to be the middle-class district. It kept a fair balance between the more wealthy-looking folks and the considerably less so. Now, closer to the castle was the district of the very rich, nobles, merchants, and the degeneracy found in their homes there, and I left the district as soon as I could. I was on my way towards the ass end of town. No matter what the planet, some things never change. A bar in the seediest corners is exactly where you can find the true sense of a place and its people. It was still a bit of a ride, and as the city was impressively large, my gaze wandered upwards. Full moon hung overhead, far bigger and brighter than the moon I knew. The surface was completely smooth, like a glass orb hanging in the sky. It struck me as wrong somehow, as if the moon should be a constant, no matter how far from home I get. Why is it so damn smooth? I mused aloud. Jeff didn't even look up. I figure it's because it's new. It takes billions of years for asteroid impacts to get that kind of look you're used to. You don't think the planet and the moon were created just like that, do you? I asked. Well, that's exactly what I think. This planet, moon, and maybe even the whole damn system has probably only existed for as long as we've been here. Erudite was hard to get used to when someone was used to unfamiliar worlds. I understand that the definition of it, but I miss some contextual phrase. System. Solar system, Jeff clarified. And just like that, I knew what a solar system was. And the scale involved. I went silent for a moment, both loved and hated thinking about these sorts of things. On one hand, it made me feel small. On the other, well, it made my problems feel just as minuscule. Goes to show how nobody really knows shit. When I mused, we were all finally reaching the lower-class district. I struggled to call it a slum, as it wasn't quite that bad. Or perhaps my standards for a slum were a tad askewed. Entering into this district was odd, as there was no gradual change. One street was middle class, and the next street was lower class, as if there was some invisible line separating the two. The streets were dirty, and so were the people. Buildings followed the same lack of constant design the rest of the city did, but taken to more of an extreme. Layout made no sense whatsoever, with spiraling alleyways leading every which way, a large road that led into a tiny little cul-de-sac, and buildings only accessible from the second story of the neighboring structures. The only commonality was the fact that every building was made out of some kind of dark wood, created an oppressive atmosphere, and smelled of mildew and poverty. I took a deep breath, and I could practically feel the air settle on my skin. It felt more comfortable than that damn castle. Jeff trotted down the narrow streets, avoiding poorly dressed citizens all along the way. I was dressed well, but not so much that I was out of place. Jeff, on the other hand, drew far more attention. Unlike the middle-class district, horses were rare here, and generally only ridden by guardsmen, and Jeff himself was quite a specimen. Now, I reckon nobody was quite so stupid as to attempt to steal a horse like that. Most rightfully assumed that they would receive a kick to the head, and steered clear. I would normally be concerned with leaving a horse unattended in a place like this, but most horses aren't smarter than their riders. It didn't take long to find a suitably dry tavern. I had an eye for these sort of things, and it practically oozed seediness. A gnarled wooden sign hung out front reading Aldemir's Wenches. Rotting steps lowered to the dirt road and rose to boisterous laughter. Light shined out the windows and through its swinging doors. "Do you even have any money?" Jeff asked. "I got myself a bit of an advance payment. Should be worth a whole lot of beer if I'm understanding the currency correctly." "Oh, and how uncharacteristically well thought out. Have you considered how I'll get shit-faced?" I shrugged. "I'll figure something out." Jeff sighed as I dismounted, and I checked my weapons and my coin wallet, and I took off my hat. It paid to have good manners, after all. I nodded to myself and walked right in. The swinging doors swung open, and the air felt like a slap in the face. It smelled of sweat, vomit, and leather. The humidity was so damn strong that it bothered even me. The laughter and swearing were loud enough to drown out my own thoughts. It truly felt like home. I took in the sights. Interior was surprisingly well decorated, with plenty of ornaments on the wall. Artistic depictions of people. Mounted parts from local monsters, and plenty of other knickknacks. Unlike my room in the castle, this tavern was clearly loved. Not clean. More interesting were the people. I've seen plenty of folks in the streets on my way here, which is why I was quite shocked to see that there weren't just humans. For a moment, I thought it was a Chanria, but I was wrong. It was a different species altogether. I pushed my feelings aside. The tavern that had dozens of people in it, and quite a few of them were noticeably not human. I saw a waitress with what seemed to be cat ears, serving slender women with unnaturally long ears. I observed another woman with a scale-plated tail, arm wrestling with a man with a face like a wolf. She was the one who reminded me of Chanria, with a similar assortment of scales along her face and limbs. Now there might have been more, but the tavern was big enough for 2 whole stories, and I was already on my way towards the bar. I don't make a habit of standing in doorways. Nobody ever glanced up as I entered, so I clearly didn't stand out all that much. Though I got the sense that all the regulars here stood out in their own ways. I danced around a couple of smelly bodies before I reached the bar. Manning it was an older gentleman, human as far as I could see. I waited as he dealt with some other customers, drinks dancing in his hands, and practiced efficiency. I read the signboard behind him where he was busy, erudite, making it effortless as always. There was only ever one language I've seen used in the rest of the city, but I could see dozens here, though most were only 1 or 2 drinks in each language. I was curious as to why that was, but the old man was about done, and he walked over to me, seemingly covering twice the distance he should have in the same amount of time. "What can I get you?" he asked, voice like butter. I scratched my chin. "Bittered sling." He raised a wizened eyebrow, and I felt a small prick of power wash over me. He was quickly rebuffed by my superior core. It was my turn to raise an eyebrow. "What did you just try and do?" The old man looked genuinely embarrassed. "Apologies. It's my skill that helps me identify the drink my target desires. I'm not familiar with what a bittered sling is, so I used it, and it's just not as helpful as it used to be." I nodded. I understood. I'm not from around here. "So how about you just surprise me? I ain't picky, as long as it's sweet." I placed 10 coppers on the table, 2 more than the most expensive drink on the board. The old man quickly pocketed and smiled. "I'm sure I can think of something." He scurried away, tracking another man's order, and then wrangling his impressive assortment of drinks. The cat-eared waitress came by and whispered a few words in my ear. Every movement of that worker was quick, but without any kind of rush. My appreciation was cut short by a shadow looming over me as I sighed. "Where are you from, stranger?" came a deep voice, tone carrying a threatening undertone. I turned around and saw the wolf-looking man from earlier. He was massive, maybe 7 feet tall. I could see his muscles bulging beneath his skin, seemingly trying to escape the prison of his poorly kept gray fur. Most of the bar-goers noticed the beginnings of a commotion and were nudging their drinks and partners. Everybody here had plenty of good ideas on how this was going to go down. I'm afraid that ain't any of your business, partner. He took a threatening step closer, trying to use his height as leverage. I think it is. You look like you're from the West Side. What is a fancy pants like you doing all the way down here, huh? I smiled sardonically. Apologies, I should have taken a quick roll around in the mud. I've been told the look suits me. I looked him over, eyes dragging on all the matted fur, although I ain't so sure it worked for you. The yelling died down considerably, and the wolfman stared down at me, and I could see his intelligence in his eyes. He wasn't just a drunk fool looking for a fight. He wanted something. The man sitting next to me set down a bottle well within my reach. The wolfman came to a decision, and he took another step and opened his mouth. You! And I glassed him.